From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Andrew the Triforce Howard. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Friends and neighbors, fellow conspiracy realists. Ooh, how we love some hidden history. You guys, what's your favorite hidden history story that we've covered?
I don't know, Atlantis, secret civilizations, lost civilizations are always a banger.
Roanoke was a big one for me when we first started looking into it, and now not so much.
Right?
Yeah.
I always confuse it with Krakatoa. It's Croatan. That's the word that was etched onto the tree.
Krakatoa is the sentient mutant island in the X-Men mythos.
There you go.
Which I
Ben,
love.
I do have to respectfully ask you to read this incredible quote that you got because I love the attribution so very much.
Oh, yeah. Our boy wrote this. We're our governing force, some would say. For after 7 more days, I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out from the face of the land every living thing that I have made. Now, do we want to guess who said that? Allegedly?
Jars of clay.
Jars of clay, yes. Oh, man. I remember we were talking about jars of clay earlier, maybe a few months ago, and I went back on a deep jars of clay binge. That one song is still, I like it. I won't say I love it.
I think it was just called Flood, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. This is not a Jars of Clay lyric pull, however. This is, in fact, from God.
Yes.
From Genesis 7:4.
Yeah, one of his first bangers. It's also where he, or not to gender God, it's also where God super humbly describes the creation of the universe. And then
I did that, he said.
And then afterwards, God says, I'm going to erase this.
Yeah, oops, mulligan.
It's a flood story. And
Do-over.
flood stories, they're so common, right? This episode takes us to a flood story. We are traveling, and I love that you mentioned Atlantis. We are traveling through time and space through the ancient Persian Gulf. And just maybe we're discovering a lost civilization along the way.
Yeah, I love this episode, the idea in particular, because we think of, at least I thought of floods in biblical terms as rain because of this very quote from Genesis. But what we're learning as we humans continue on, it's that flooding, massive flooding, like real earth-changing flooding occurs in a lot of different ways. And it's not just from rain sometimes, it's because the ocean literally moves around.
Plates, right? Yeah. Movement of the actual stuff of Earth.
Yeah, Earth is a living organism. And every so often, it has a massive fart. You know what I mean? A massive bowel movement.
Well, there you go. I mean, what better way to lead into our tiny quick break and then come back with more about Earth's farts?
Here are the facts. All right, to understand tonight's episode and the science and possible conspiracy involved, we have to first learn about the Persian Gulf. We were talking about this a little bit off air. It is also called the Arabian Gulf. The current U.S. president, quite recently in the news, came out to reporters and said, we're not calling it the Persian Gulf anymore in America. We're calling it the Arabian Gulf.
Oh, I thought he was just going to name it Gulf of America again. What if we just started naming everything of America?
Yeah.
Dibs.
As foretold.
Right?
Yeah. AF.
I don't know about you guys, but my learnings about the Persian Gulf came as a young lad when I would watch the news with my family, and it was during the original Iraq invasion by the United States.
Desert Storm, right?
Yeah,
Desert Fox, then Desert Storm.
yes,
of course.
And you would hear Father President Bush speaking. He would say the Persian Gulf all the time, and you would hear generals and people going on television talking about the Persian Gulf. And it was, they would show images often, not even of the water, of the Gulf itself. They would show images of what looks like desert and, army stuff.
Right. And then sometimes I think, not going to name names, news networks, but there were a couple news networks that got caught with their hand in the propaganda cookie jar by putting that yellow hue over things like you see in every Western depiction of Mexico in film.
Oh, the piss filter.
Yeah. I didn't know that's the name, but the piss filter.
That is what's referred to as sometimes. Can I also just say that I've never really thought about this until I've heard you guys just say the phrase so many times, but the word Gulf has sort of a sinister quality to it, doesn't it? It's very like Lovecraftian, like the idea of an abyss. Why don't we just call it the abyss, the Persian abyss?
The Persian chasm. Yeah, I hear you. I think, Noel, that speaks to Matt's point, which we got to get into as well. We in the West are very much programmed to think of the Persian Gulf in a really narrow scope. But if you put humans aside, which and you look at just the region itself, it's what's called a marginal Mediterranean Sea, like a subsidiary sea of the Arabian Sea, which itself is kind of a subsidiary of the Indian Ocean.
And is it because it's like little inlets, kind of, or they're sort of like that? Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's like an inland sea.
You can, if you look at it from above, because we now all have Google Earth and maps and all these things, you can really see where the water, where the Arabian Sea / the Indian Ocean / the Gulf of Oman, all of that water pushes in through this one pretty narrow little section around. I'm looking at a thing specifically called the Valley of the Caves here, but it's pushing around where Oman and the United Arab Emirates are. Goes around that, over the top, and then through into the Persian Gulf, or creates the Persian Gulf.
Right.
And as we move on in this episode, to me, it just really does show you already where that water comes from and like how that area could have been flooded at some point.
Right. We can also see the topography of the area now. That's key. And that little crook you're describing there, the Strait of Hormuz, is something that may also be familiar to other people. It's one of the world's most valuable bottlenecks, if we're being diplomatic. So the Persian Gulf, it's big if in comparison to the size of your average human, but it's not that big in comparison to other bodies of water. It's 93,000 square miles in area, but it's way longer than it is wide. I think its smallest width is something like 35 miles, which is very, very small and very easily controlled if you have the right toys.
That's at the Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz, right?
Strait of Hormuz, yes, correct. And the other thing that is fascinating about this is it's very long, it's very skinny, and it's very shallow. At its maximum depth, it's maybe 300 feet.
Wow.
But that's still obviously deep enough to traverse with, shipping vessels.
Yeah, exactly. Great point there, Noel. And it's called the Persian Gulf because historically it's been associated with Persia, right? The predecessor of modern Iran. And earlier this year, full disclosure, folks, some members of our crew were part of a group that traveled out that way. We actually saw a little vista of the Gulf. This was unrelated to the Strait of Hormuz. So just to be clear, we were there for podcast stuff.
Yeah, but where you guys were located, you were theoretically, I mean, if where you were, and I guess we won't say, or can we say?
No, we totally say,
yeah.
Okay. You're in Qatar, right? And in Doha specifically, where you're looking out, like across the way, if you're looking at Iran, that is precisely what we're talking about today, right?
Yeah. Part of the inspiration, in fact. It's
so Ben, that would have been along that kind of man-made boardwalk situation that we were walking around on.
Yeah.
And what was it that it was like a man-made kind of boardwalk situation that was fascinating because of just, again, the fact that they kept building it out and out and out. I believe it was called the Corniche. So that would have been the vista that Matt's describing when we were kind of walking around in that area.
Yeah. And Qatar is its own peninsula, right? If you look at a map, it's a tiny relatively small area protruding out into the ocean. And the Gulf itself is ringed by other nations. We mentioned Iran and Qatar, but also Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Oman, the United Arab Emirates. Let's spend just a little bit of time on the framework and the programming that's happened to we Westerners in the U.S. Like you were saying, Matt, when you hear the phrase Persian Gulf, you're immediately going to think of it as a historic regional hotspot, especially when it comes to the oil trade.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The spice must flow.
The spice must flow. That's why the United States has spent so much time and energy wargaming out how to disrupt a blockage of the Strait of Hormuz. And this is still a very unsafe area to travel, depending on which edge of the shore you stroll. The cool thing is, though, despite being damaged by pollution and the works of man, the Gulf is still a tremendous blessing to the area's ecology. Great fishing grounds, reefs, oysters feeding that historic pearl industry. The main thing we have to know about it, again, is very long. It's cartoonishly shallow. It's vital to modern shipping. And that, like that note, the spice must flow. That is why all developed countries keep some kind of eye on the area. And the worry is that if, particularly for anti-Iranian forces like the U.S., the worry is always that Iran might wake up, the Ayatollah might have a bad day, and they may attempt to close the strait and disrupt the world's oil trade.
One thing I thought was really interesting from some conversations with some business type folks out there in Qatar is that it is very attractive to do business with these parts of the world because there's no regime change. So things are consistent and predictable. But to your point, that does also mean that things are at the whim of one individual. But typically these areas are very business friendly, for outside investors.
Right. Especially the tax structure and things of that nature. And I think that's an important point about perceived stability. Emphasis on perceived. I mean, we looked at the modern Strait of Hormuz questions in earlier episodes. And if you want to learn more, the Institute for the Study of War just released their Iran update in, just a few days ago, May of this year. We're recording on June 3rd, 2025. But tonight, as we teased, we're looking at something a little bit different. So back in 2010, an intrepid archaeologist discovered something bizarre. He looks around and he says, well, the Gulf today is an inland sea, but we know this was not always the case. For thousands of years before it was flooded by the Indian Ocean, the Gulf may have been home to ancient communities of humans, and teaser, maybe some not quite humans, living in the area for well over 10,000 years. And then it disappeared. So what happened? Is there really out there a lost civilization hidden beneath the waves?
It seems like there might have been.
It's a fascinating case, right? Here's where it gets crazy. For millennia now, people have wanted something like Atlantis to be real. We know about it from previous episodes. Humans across various disparate cultures spun legends about lost cities and countries buried beneath large bodies of water. It is a nigh universal myth, up there with flood stories and up there with descriptions of Bigfoot or hairy men encountered in evenings of yore.
And something key to these theories that are out there, right? It's not just that there was a lost civilization. It's that there was a lost advanced civilization. So it's interesting to think of it in ways of, well, what if there just were humans there a long, long time ago? And maybe they were like the early humans that we imagine. They just didn't make it. But they were there way before we think they were there.
Yeah, they were maybe not the best or the smartest, but they were the first in that area. Yeah, you definitely heard about Atlantis if you listen to this show, and thank you for supporting us. But you've probably also therefore heard of things like Lemuria or move. There's a rogues gallery of these stories, and the specifics differ, but the broad strokes of the tale are almost always eerily similar. It's the following. There's an ancient civilization, sometimes extraordinarily advanced for their region. They anger the gods, or they fall to catastrophic natural disaster, an earthquake, a flood. They disappear. Their civilization disappears beyond human reach. And in a lot of these stories, some remnant population survives this cataclysm. They travel to new, safer lands, higher ground, maybe. They bring along with them their advanced culture and their technologies to the larger world. And we see this lightly floated as explanations for commonalities that current research can't explain, right? Like, why do these statues ringing this part of the Pacific look so similar to statues on this other part of the Pacific shoreline, right? And that's not inherently a racist proposition or line of questioning. I would say it's just an attempt to explain why these people so far apart from each other seem to have such similar taste, you know?
Yeah, agreed. You guys related? What's going on?
Mm-hmm. You guys keep making the same statue though, you know? Right. But then it's like the pyramid question, right? When people say, oh, look at all these ancient pyramids. Yeah, maybe it's because a pile of rocks is actually a really smart and sustainable, durable building, right?
Oh, yeah. It's that parallel thinking I'm always harping on, and we're always harping on. I mean, it's very real, and you start to see it more and more the more you dig into history and connections between regions and things that maybe shouldn't have a direct tie, but yet somehow seem to coexist. A lot of times it's just sort of the obvious choice, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, so therefore we know the existence of flood myths, especially. It's not inherently controversial. Humans have been around for a while now, not the longest lived organism on Earth, but, you know, good hustle. And over that time, disasters have occurred. There are proven cases in the modern records of towns and cities that were lost to floods in the modern day. Modern civilization has even started flooding areas on purpose. Check out the Three Gorges Dam. Travel a little north of the Atlanta metro area and ask yourself what's under Lake Lanier.
Yeah, and good luck finding anything under there now. Like, just because waters in a lot of places that are flooded are extremely murky. It's a little different with ocean water, right? Sure. But if you're talking 100 feet down, 300 feet down, good luck being able to go down there and effectively excavate anything, right? I mean, if something gets lost to flooding, right, it just, humanity has a tremendously difficult time recovering stuff, and especially doing the painstaking process of sifting through layers and layers of soil, right, beneath that water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said, right? Water is one of the greatest destroyers on the planet, right? We were talking about this, I think, in Ridiculous History. Rock versus water, if there is no time limit, water always wins. It just doesn't take off days, you know? And,
see the Grand Canyon.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's a great, oh, man. And that's one of the few things in the United States where the name does measure up. Please go see the Grand Canyon if you get a chance. It is baffling. It's like how we all got the zap on us when we saw the Hoover Dam for the first time.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's I mean, you use the word cartoonish, but it does feel like you're in a video game or something. It's surreal.
Well, yeah, and it's man's intense, insane almost. It is insane attempt to control those powers that we're talking about that are so huge, and because that water really doesn't care, and it's gonna move, and then it's gonna be around for millions of years, billions of years until this whole thing ends.
I always remember one of my family members when we first saw both the Grand Canyon and the Hoover Dam. As a matter of fact, he used that line twice, but seeing the Hoover Dam, he just said, "Behold, man has spat in the face of God. Will there be consequences?" And it's like, you know, that's intense stuff to say to an 8-year-old. But we kept moving on. It was a cool gift shop. So as a result, I love this point about spiritual explanations, right? Nearby populations are running from these floods. We know floods occurred, right? And as they were running and dying, by the way, they were struggling to understand what happened and why it happened to them specifically. So they often turned to spiritual explanations. Let's pause for a word from our sponsors here. And when we return, we'll learn more about why these myths are so powerful and whether, indeed, they're myths at all. All right, we're back. Legends. Catastrophic events occur. Time passes. For the first few years, we kind of know what happened, right? If we're in nearby areas. Decades pass. We're telling the story to our kids, especially pre the written word. Centuries pass. The legend keeps growing. And, let's say Noel actually was at ground zero for a catastrophic flood. And he and his family make it to higher, safer ground. They restart their lives. And when anybody asks, Noel, you give a pretty fact-based account of the flood. But then the guy in the next town, let's say, Matt, that's you. Let's say you hear it, and then you hear it fourth or fifth hand. So you start providing your own perspective and narrative to it. And then the country of Bolistan or whatever hears about it, and then they start adding a thing, but they have to make sure it squares with their existing cultural and spiritual belief system, right?
Well,
so they start adding in their own gods.
Well, they have to translate it to their own language as well.
Yeah, which is always difficult.
Now imagine that that's been happening for thousands of years, if not tens of thousands of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or more. It's an oral palimpsest. It's an aggregate crowdsourced legend. And at the end of that great game of telephone, that process, the legend that people share could have little resemblance to the actual survival story that ancient Noel told people when he made it out of the water, Yep. So it's frustrating because these myths can largely be malarkey, but they often can also have a grain, a pearl, since we're talking about the Gulf, of truth. And that's why experts continue to explore sites of ancient human habitation. Sometimes they're informed by these legends and oral history, just like the guy who figured out Troy was a real city. Yeah. Every so often, these folks do find something amazing. And we got to give kudos to one of the best in the game right now, who, by the way, is the primary source for everything we're about to explore.
Oh, yeah. One, Dr. Jeffrey Ian Rose. Sorry, his name is just Dr. Jeffrey Ian Rose.
Jeffrey Ian Rose. That's
I like that name.
Ridiculous. And that's what he's going to be to me from now on.
Jeffrey.
Dude wrote an absolute banger of a thing in 2010. I think it was 2010, 2011,
yes.
maybe? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're focusing on today.
Yeah. Now, this guy is an archaeologist and researcher with the University of Birmingham, but he works with a ton of people and institutions. We want to be clear, he's not a wingnut, okay? He's not some cynical fabulist selling tall tales about Atlantis and trying to get you to buy his book.
No. Instead, Dr. J. Jefferson Jeffrey
Jingleheimer
the third.
Yeah.
Yes, Jingleheimer Schmidt the third is in fact a preeminent prehistoric archaeologist with a super deep penchant for the Arabian Peninsula's Paleolithic and Neolithic periods, and described by National Geographic. His areas of interest include modern human origins, Neolithization, stone tool technology, human genetics, rock art, geoarchaeology, underwater archaeology, comparative religions, and Near Eastern mythology and folklore. No slouch, a bit of a polymath here. Pretty impressive resume. Some of these things I did not know existed. Rock art? Give me
I like that phrase too. Neolithization was new to me.
How is that the Neolithization of things? How is that even, what does that mean?
Taken to mean the process of human progress toward the Neolithic age.
Oh, kind of like modernization. I got it.
Yeah. The Neolithic version thereof.
But not at all. Completely not modern. Yes.
Well, guys, I'm particularly fascinated by the underwater archaeology thing because that feels like archaeology on ultra hard mode, like hardcore mode. You know,
it's like something you need James Cameron to do. You know,
yeah, it's like I'd say it's like cave diving because you're adding so many other tricky variables to regular archaeology on the land, which is already super difficult and can be such a dice roll.
Well, no, it's the kind of thing you hear even today, you know, some of these experimental vessels like imploding. Remember that, Chestnut? It's very difficult to get to some of these areas, you know, like the Marianas Trench and such, to do something like this.
Mm-hmm. And again, the Gulf is very shallow. This is getting interesting,
so
right?
It's a little easier hard mode for the Gulf, for underwater archaeology there.
So we're establishing the bona fides here to let you know that Dr. Rose, whom we're all big fans of, Dr. Rose is not some kind of ancient aliens guy. In practice, he's a lot more like a detective. It's just the cases on his docket, the stuff he attempts to solve are these ancient cold cases, these mysteries. So if you really want to figure out whether there is a lost civilization in this area specifically, he's your go-to guy. He's the number one person you ask because he'll already know what everybody else knows, right? We love a one-stop shop. So he notices all this stuff. Again, a top-tier expert in his field. And he says, hang on a tick, there's something strange. Recent archaeological discoveries are showing irrefutable evidence of what he calls in his paper, a wave of human settlements along the shores of the Gulf, dating back at least 7,500 years. That makes sense, right? We know humans historically gather near water sources, especially before the invention of the jug. Isn't that crazy? I'm still thinking about that.
Oh, man, we're just talking about that, the humble jug, the humble vessel.
Yeah. Dude, but that's no small thing, guys. My God. Right. Holy crap.
It's so weird to think about. Look around at how many containers are in your immediate area. Right? That wasn't always a thing. We were saying this on Ridiculous History. Early humans used to find a source of water and think, well, crap, I live here now.
Yeah.
I can't carry it anywhere.
Well, yeah. And as we advanced at all, humanity realized, I need to carry something large. I need to carry something heavy. Better use the water. That's really the only way I'm going to get that anywhere. Right. And that was why it's such a good point, you guys. And man, I never thought about jugs like that. But we talked about it when we went deep on rivers and just how much those rivers have been the way humanity got things around, especially with trade. And then you're thinking about this large body of water. If there was any landmass that we're talking about today, humans would have been on that thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because we'll look at the real estate in a second. We know, Dr. Rose speaks to a number of like science communicator websites in 2010 when this paper in specific publishes, and he has a quote that explains why he's so baffled. He says the following to Science Daily.
Speaking with Science Daily in 2010, Dr. Rose had this to say, where before there had been but a handful of scattered hunting camps, suddenly over 60 new archaeological sites appear virtually overnight. These settlements boast well-built, permanent stone houses, long-distance trade networks, elaborately decorated pottery, domesticated animals, and even evidence for one of the oldest boats in the world. So typically, the quote is done. These types of sophisticated, super developed settlements have a historical track record, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see proverbial fingerprints, that milestones that mark progress over time. right? The mechanisms for carrying stuff become more advanced. We see better irrigation, and usually you can see a slow progression. So Dr. Rose is saying, hang on, why does this, I don't know why I'm giving him a catchphrase, hang on a tick, why does this civilization, this collection of sophisticated sites, why don't they have a backstory? Why did they just pop into the historical record out of the blue? I'm a world-class archaeologist. I know that this is impossible from everything I understand about human progress. So there must be evidence for a precursor civilization. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's that we are, for some reason, not looking in the right place. Highly logical. So he looks around and then he says, what if there is evidence and it's right under our noses or right out there under the waves of the Persian Gulf? And I'm picturing a moment, where he's on some shoreline at a vista.
Yeah.
And then has that light bulb and says, to his assistant, run, grab me the snorkel, boy.
Yeah.
Get ye to a scuba divery, sir.
Especially considering where he's finding these things, right? And you guys correct me a little bit if I'm wrong here. I'm trying to visualize on the map where exactly he's finding stuff, he and his colleagues are finding stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at that a Live Science article from around the same time, and it's got a picture here of, it's got the Gulf of Oman going in the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf right there. Mm. And you can see Qatar, and then you can see all of these different sites where this civilization or remnants of a civilization have been found. And it is literally, it's across this entire area. Mm. It's in Iran all the way going around. It's in, what is the rest of this land here?
Modern day Oman, Yemen, UAE,
Qatar. It's all of that stuff.
It's the southern. It's the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, under the empty quarter, or actually part of the empty quarter at this point.
Well, it's fascinating just to see how many sites. You said 60, right?
Yes, 60 overall. So if you look at that map from Live Science, which does come from Dr. Rose's work, the numbers on that map indicate what are called find spots. Find spots can be more than one settlement or more than one site.
Well, there are areas where water or sea levels fell a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's I don't know. It's just exposing, again, because I always forget when we think about archaeology, you're going layers into the earth to find stuff, right? Because as that sediment builds up over the years, over decades, sometimes centuries, sometimes longer, you're finding stuff that was there, placed there, whether by accident or on purpose, so long ago.
You're also this is one of the coolest things. I'm waxing poetic a little bit, but you're also hunting the ghost of rivers. You're hunting the ghost of lakes, and you're doing that by going out to what we, the unlearned, would simply call a brutal, inhospitable desert. And then you're going, oh, wait, if I dig down far enough, there's gravel here that could have only been formed by a river. So we found the ghost of a river. That's so cool, man.
Dude, and once you find that, theoretically, you can find remnants of people who traveled on that river or lived right next to it. That's at least the best case scenario that you're hoping for.
100%, yeah. I mean, I guess the wildest best case scenario is if you dig down far enough and you find an active ancient civilization.
Oh, okay.
And they go, right? I don't think that would have happened. But
that's your tippy top.
That's the dream.
I think that's asking a lot. That's like winning the lottery and saying, why haven't I won the lottery twice?
Yeah.
Just say thank you.
You just hit your chisel one time, you just hear,
hey.
Somebody's down there.
That's funny.
I love it. Maybe we'll find it. Maybe we'll find that kind of situation. But right now, this is already immensely exciting to Dr. Rose, and his research leads him to that groundbreaking paper we mentioned, New Light on Human Prehistory in the Arabo-Persian Gulf Oasis. He writes this for Current Anthropology. You can read it online by searching for his name and the title. He's got a stunning case for this. So here we are. Dr. Rose is looking out across the waters, and he's thinking, what if? Speaking of what if we take a break for a word from our sponsors and then dive into his actual research? Dive in.
Oh, yeah.
We must.
And we've returned. All right. So after conducting a lot of intense research with his colleagues, to be clear, Dr. Rose publishes a groundbreaking report in 2010. It's a paper titled New Light on Human Prehistory in the Arabo-Persian Gulf Oasis. It's published in Current Anthropology, which is anthropology journal. You can read it online by checking for his name and the title in your search browser of choice. And he builds a stunning case for his argument. And it all starts with the timeline as we understand it.
Right. And that timeline is noted by Rose. The newly discovered communities all seem to spring up along this shoreline around 8,000 years in the past. And that is just when the Gulf started getting flooded. So describing some of these populations in his work as new colonists, he and his colleagues believed that these creators of the settlements were what we might call climate refugees today, an ongoing issue and one that isn't new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the waters drove them from their ancestral home, and they migrated to dry land, and they brought their culture with them. The lessons their civilization had already learned. So again, we see the Atlantis myth. They don't have hover cars, but they know agriculture, right? They know animal husbandry. They know how to build structures that last.
Yep, and just my dumb human brain, I have to really paint a picture of this stuff and imagining people living on lower land that's closer to sea level, right, in this area, and it's more hospitable because of where it's located in this region of the world. It makes sense that they're living there. That's where generations of lives have existed in this lower area. As that water starts coming in more and more and more, it's like somebody along that line of somebody's grandfather has to say, I think we finally have to leave. Like, it's time.
Right. Or I had a vision.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's the resort to authority. That's how you move crowds of people at this point.
That's it.
So I agree with you there. This theory becomes more compelling as we continue exploring it. This antediluvian area, the pre-flood area, it would have been primo real estate. We know a bit about the ecology at the time. The Gulf Basin was above water as far back as 75,000 years ago. Dr. Rose, by the way, loosely refers to this theory as a Persian Gulf oasis. And we cannot emphasize how much better this neighborhood is than all of the surrounding stuff.
Yes.
Right? The desert sucks, man.
Yes.
The desert is brutal. And I'm sorry to say that. This is not an aspersion to people who live in the desert. We're just saying it's a rough place for humans.
Inhospitable, indeed.
Well, I mean, look, the only reason so many humans live in a lot of these areas right now, we have these amazing bustling cities, is because of the technology of cities, is because of, the way we can move water around, the way we can make use of water and desalinate water and all this other stuff.
Well, and also locate like underground wells and resources in the desert, oases or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's so much civilization around that Persian Gulf now, right? I mean, if you think of Qatar, it's literally surrounded by the Persian Gulf waters there, and you only through technology can we live there now in a pleasant way, maybe is the way to say it.
Right. I mean, certainly the Bedouins and nomadic desert folk of the past figured a lot of that out. And there certainly are animals that are adapted to that, but it is a brutal and very difficult and dangerous way of life.
Unforgiving.
But there's doesn't the Tigris Euphrates run right into the Persian Gulf? So like
Yes.
theoretically, before all that ocean water came in, and what do you refer to it as, Ben? The Persian Gulf, an oasis.
Yes.
Called it an oasis for a reason, because theoretically that could be fairly fertile land if you've got the river running down through there and it's a lower area, so plants can actually like survive and maybe even thrive in that area for a time.
100%. It's fed potable water from 4 different rivers: Tigris, Euphrates, Karun, the Wadi Batan, and then it's got wells to that point, powered by underground springs. The fossil water, you would call it. This place is a green jewel in an otherwise very rough neighborhood for humanity. So Dr. Rose concludes that when the Gulf Basin was at its driest, its least flooded, there was an exposed landmass for this oasis that would have been around the size of Great Britain. That's huge. Of course you would live there. You can't walk away from that deal. What, are you going to go sit and try not to die of dehydration while you look across the way and these people in the valley are just bawling out?
Good luck.
Dude, well, and if you think we think about the Fertile Crescent, right, as over there in Egypt, along the African northern coast there, and going around what's now like Israel's Lebanon, parts of Syria, and over there in Turkey, right? At least in my mind, like I think of that whole Fertile Crescent thing. Maybe I'm wrong there. I hope I'm right. But then imagining getting all, like, if you were to traverse those lands that are now modern day Iraq and part of Saudi Arabia and Jordan, all the way over there to find this land, like that would be almost I don't know, that I'm just trying to imagine if you made it across that land to find this oasis, right?
That would inspire a religion.
Yes.
That's absolutely what would happen. And not to profile ancient humans too much, but that's 100% the precedent. Nobody at that time is going to be saying, here is the scientific explanation for the ecological advantages of this area.
It's just, holy crap. Thanks, whoever. We really appreciate this being here.
Right. This is back in the time where every community's self-described name for themselves was the real people. So this is what God has given us, the real people. And
we were chosen, obviously.
And nobody else can move in, right? Yeah. I had a dream and God said, you guys are mid. So, okay, Dr. Rose also finds this earlier precedent. This is really interesting. In the course of his research, while he is researching, new evidence indicates modern Homo sapiens could have been in this area, especially in the southern Arab Peninsula. They could have been in there even before the Persian oasis was above water, which means that ancient people in modern-day Yemen and Oman could have made it off of the African continent 100,000 years ago. The current theory says that the first successful migration of that sort occurred between 50 to 70,000 years ago. So this is a huge shift in the timeline, in the story of humanity. People probably found refuge in this oasis in waves of migration, multiple points throughout history.
To me, this is so fascinating because humans, in some ways, are like water. Not in just the ways, that we were taught to be like water by ours.
Not to mention that some absurd percentage of our literal bodies are made up of water.
Yes. But Bruce Lee aside, and contents of our body aside, humans, we have found, a lot like water, just need time for stuff, which is why this concept of if you add 50,000 years to the timeline of humanity, what types of things can humans come up with in that 50,000 years? Right?
Really great points.
And just like how much innovation can you get in a really fast amount of time? So, I think that's why it's so boggling sometimes.
Especially if the early communities are not confronted with existential threats, but environmental prods, right? Carrots and sticks, that's what drives technology. Because if human population is in an ideal environment, with no pressures endangering them or forcing innovation, then they might just, keep hunting and gathering.
Just hang out, do that thing for a while because it's working and it's good.
Don't fix it. It's not broken. You know what I mean? Why do we need to farm animals, dude? Just wait for the mammoth to run by and kill it.
Well, yeah, until a group of people riding mammoths come over the hillside and you're like, uh-oh.
That's another environmental pressure. Different
swinging giant clubs made of bone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Humanity is often the main problem to the solutions it creates. And this is where we get even more out there. And this is from Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose also sees concurrent research proving that there were Neanderthal populations in the upper parts of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This means that this oasis area may have been the contact zone between modern Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Again, our bad, Neanderthals. Our bad. We ate a lot of you and killed you.
We did our best.
But to be fair, you were eating
as many of you as possible.
You were eating us too. So,
That's true. That is true, man.
All right. Well, let's not we're turning this into a non-apology. Neanderthals, we're sorry you feel an apology is necessary.
Oh, geez.
But that is a fascinating Venn diagram, right? And you can maybe see some of the legacy here if you did a region-wide DNA test to see the percentage of Neanderthal DNA, right? If any is present. But now you notice, folks, we're talking about this area in the past tense, and Dr. Rose does the same in all of his research. Because the civilization fell, the Indian Ocean, way before it was called the Indian Ocean, expanded inland. It drowns the oasis. It forces these well-established multi-generational communities to seek safer ground. I still am not clear on the timeline here. I don't think we know whether it was a gradual process, like rising shorelines today, and it just got a little bit tougher with each generation, or whether some areas experience something more similar to a biblical flood.
Well, yeah. I mean, and again, going away from the rain flood, the 40 days of rain flood into oh crap, the ocean is like moving towards us because something broke, right? Some piece of land fell away, and now the ocean is just making its way to us right now. And that, to me, I don't know. As you said, if you look through the paper, you look through the writing about the paper, there's not a lot of evidence to show one way or the other. But it does seem to me like it was a apocalyptic moment.
Yeah, I think we all tend to think or process in those terms, because when I close my eyes, I immediately imagine just this tsunami running up on an unsuspecting community. It's like the ocean saying, "Oh, you thought shit was sweet." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, because the other way you imagine it, or at least in my head, and I may be fully uninformed in this, but you imagine whatever civilization has grown on that peninsula, if it's there, it gradually expands out because the water's coming in. So we're moving what we've got already and, the stuff we're working with out just a little bit further along those lines. And we kind of see that, right, with the way those archaeological sites are spread out and just all around that area. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't know. It feels like you have to leave everything behind situation more than a let's begin to move.
Yeah, agreed. And we also know that the water level has risen and fallen over this vast swath of time. It's fascinating because for a lot of reasons, it's obvious Dr. Rose is onto something, and other colleagues in the field agree that this is an excellent theory. But if it were a civilization that was, say, at Point Nemo in the modern day, the most distant point from land out there in the Pacific Ocean, then it would be pretty much impossible to discover material evidence of an ancient civilization. But the Gulf is so shallow, right? Send the snorkel boy and figure out what's going on, right? We just need funding for the snorkel boy.
Just 300 feet, though. Come on.
It's a long snorkel.
But the peninsula...
Maybe like a diving bell situation, like one of those old giant like astronaut diving helmets.
Yeah, but, theoretically, 300 feet is the maximum depth, right, of the Gulf. So this peninsula is going to be quite a bit higher than that. So you're not wrong. The snorkel boy would actually fare a little better than I imagined just a moment ago.
Well, better than if you were diving, into the Marianas Trench or something.
Yeah.
You wouldn't make it there.
Yeah.
So this would be an amazing time for research. It still is, but the issue is not the water. The issue is not the physical demands of the Gulf. The issue is the humans around the Gulf. It is a hotspot for geopolitical tension. That's why we mentioned this at the top of the episode. It can be extremely dangerous for researchers to work in the area. Yes, including Iranian researchers. There's often a series of challenging logistics and legal issues involved. But still, if humanity could just get past that, it would be on the cusp of astonishing discoveries, things that could reshape our understanding not just of the ancient world on that peninsula, but society's understanding of the grand capital letters human story overall. You know what I mean? This is a big deal. If we could stop killing each other.
Yeah. Hey. Oh. Woo. Yeah. Man, it is amazing. Guys, in reading these articles, it does seem as though there needs to be some kind of actual underwater archaeology, right?
Yeah.
That needs to happen here. And this was 2010 when it was put out. So we've got about 15 years. When I was looking, I wanted to ask y'all, I couldn't find a bunch of new writing, a bunch of new updates, or any real updates on some of these sites or even on Dr. Rose's work. So do we know where we are?
Well, it's tough because Dr. Rose is, I like the word polymath for it. His research extends far beyond this particular line of inquiry. He's kind of laying the groundwork, and then he's looking into other traditions. If you go on Google Scholar, it's always a great way to find people's research. You'll see that he's been publishing in the area as recently as 2019. I'm sure he has other stuff coming out, but he's looking at the first peoples of Oman, Paleolithic archaeology. He is into a lot of stuff. So we don't have full published updates to this question in particular, but I believe, strongly hope that those updates are on the way. It may just be a matter of funding. It may be a matter of negotiating between hostile world powers. I don't know. It's easy for the public to shrug and say, okay, guys, this stuff is neat, I guess, but shouldn't we spend the money on modern problems? We have a lot of those already. You know what I mean? Like, why are you worried about ancient water? Let's make sure current water is drinkable.
Yeah, sure. But we have learned, right, that looking back at the way humans dealt with problems is one of the best ways to see how to move forward sometimes, or at least how to not move forward in a couple of particular ways.
Right.
I don't know. And Oman, when I'm just looking at the map again, Oman's just right at the kind of the tip right there, Strait of Hormuz, and then just to the east of that is Oman. It's the Gulf of Oman right there on the other side. So that's fascinating that he's still there doing research. I don't know. I just want to learn more.
Yeah, we want to learn more, and we can't wait to hear from you, because the answer about dismissing the past, there's validity to acknowledging modern problems, but also misses the point. This is some of the most crucial research humans can conduct. Learning about the past doesn't just teach you about the past. It reframes your understanding of the present, and every so often, it gives us a glimpse into the future. So I think we unanimously agree, keep on keeping on. We want to hear your stories of other lost civilizations. We just get so excited when we find a real one. And this, by all accounts, appears to be the genuine article, The Real McCoy. So tell us where people should look next. You can find us online. You can find us on email. You can give us a call on the phone.
You can indeed find us in all those places online. We exist at the handle Conspiracy Stuff on Facebook with our Facebook group, Here's Where It Gets Crazy, on X, FKA, Twitter, and on YouTube with video content galore for your perusing enjoyment. On Instagram and TikTok, however, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show, and there's more.
Yes, we have a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, you'll find yourself within a 3-minute voicemail. Please give yourself a cool nickname and let us know within that message if we can use your name and message on the air. If you'd like to instead send us an email, we are
the entities that read each piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. So join us out here beneath the waves. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.